Okay, in this video we're going to be working on a little HTML project where we have a text area and the user types in some text and presses a button to convert that text to images of lettering. So for every single character that we type in the text box, we're going to have some sort of display stage area where there is an image, an IMG tag for every single character that's typed in the text box. Okay, so we have here letters as images, an HTML file on the desktop, and just some very simple HTML and CSS, kind of a standard set of things that you would start out a HTML page with. I set the title as letters as images. We've got your standard set of CSS, box sizing, border box, some general body, and page heading, which is the title here. And we set the color of the text to white. We've got kind of a dark theme here. It's a little easier on the eyes. Alright, and so in our HTML here we have our body tag. This is our H1 tag, which is our heading. And then the very last element of the body, children, is this script tag. Okay, and this is where our JavaScript is going to go. Okay, so the idea here is we're going to have a set of controls, which is basically going to consist of a label, a text area, and a button. And then underneath that set of controls, we're going to have a stage, a display area, where we're going to display the letters that are typed into the text area as images. Okay, and here on the desktop, we see this is what our images look like. So we've got A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And as we go through, basically what we're trying to do is just, this is sort of how a font might work, right? Fonts are a little bit different, but the idea is the same. When the computer detects an ASCII character of a particular binary value, it inserts the appropriate font character, right? So instead of using a font, we're using HTML and using image tags. All right. So first, let's make the divs. We're going to need a div for the controls. And then we're going to need a div for the stage display, right? So just another div here. Oops, I'm too low there. I want to call that a display stage or stage display. Or display stage, I guess. Okay, so inside here, we're going to add our controls, but we're also going to need to have some CSS up here. So let's go ahead and do that. So this is controls. We're going to specify the CSS for that div and display stage. All right. In here, we're basically going to want some, general CSS that you might have in a div where you're structuring your page. We're going to want to specify a height and a width. So the controls div is going to be not very high, only maybe 100 pixels. So we'll say height 100 px. And then we're going to have a width, and we'll make it 80%. So it'll get bigger and smaller depending on how wide the viewport is of the browser. So we'll say width 80%. Alright, and then we might want some padding. Well, let's just start with this. We'll set a background color, mainly just so we can distinguish it between our body background color. And we'll make this a little bit darker than the body. And then we'll do height, width, and background color on the display stage as well. So we'll copy and paste that, but instead of height of 100 pixels, we'll do something like 400. And you can change that to whatever you prefer. Right? Okay. So we can reload this page, and we see we have a darker area. It looks like just one. It's actually two that are lined up, but you can't tell. If we right click and go to inspect, you can see there's one below and one above. Right? So we might want to look at this and have some sort of distinction between those two divs. So in the HTML, in between each one of those two divs, we might add an HR tag that will give us a horizontal rule, which is basically just a line. Oops. Okay, here we go. So we have one above and below the display stage. We'll see if it looks good with another one or not. 1, 2. We could put one underneath there too. That might look better. So we'll have 3 total, but this is just preference. You don't necessarily have to do it. So reload the page. There we go. So we got, these are the HR tags, and we've got a section for controls and a section for the main display. Alright, so we need a little bit more CSS here. We're going to need some padding, probably just 10 pixels and 40 pixels. 10 pixels top and bottom, 40 on left and right. So padding 10px top and bottom, and then 40px left and right. We can do that for both of these. That will affect the inside of the div, how the content lays out. There'll be now space where the content will lay out. Now for the outside, everything is squished over to the left. What we want is this probably centered. So we're going to use margin auto on the left and right hand side, and it will evenly distribute the extra margin space on the left hand side and the right hand side. Okay, so we do that on both of these. We'll say margin auto, margin left auto, and then margin right auto. So we'll duplicate that line and say margin right, and then copy and paste this. Alright, and my linter doesn't like that these are not in alphabetical order. It's not really that big of a deal, but you can do it if you want. Oh, that's fine. Alright, so we save that, reload the page, and now we see margin auto worked appropriately. Okay, so we've got that happening for us. Now this is going to be our main stage, so at some point there might be a whole lot of text here. So it might overflow, and if it does overflow, we want to make this div have a scroll bar here so we can scroll that content. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the code here in the display stage and say overflow auto, and that's going to allow my scroll bar to appear. Okay, so we can test that out and see kind of what this might look like. So we've got the display stage here, and I'm going to add a bunch of these image tags to give us kind of an idea of what this might look like, you know, once we've translated the text into these image tags. So we would have something like this, an image tag with a class. The class will be a character image, right? And then so we can add CSS to that, and then the source for this image is going to be our letters folder. See, our document right now is on the desktop, and so I can access anything where this document is located. I can access other files and folders from it. Okay, so if I just type in letters, this is going to reference this folder here, or directory, right? Letters slash, and we already saw, if I open this up, we have A, B, C, and D. So every letter that we're talking about, if you open it up, is named by what letter the picture represents, right? So I can say this is L.png, right? And image tags don't have any content within them, right? And so we self-close them. You don't have to. You could just do that if you wanted. All right, and then I'll duplicate this line, and we'll say T or E, and then T, T, E, R, S. So this is letters, and we'll refresh this real quick and see what this looks like here. Okay, so these are really big, so we probably want to use some CSS to shrink these down a little bit. Okay, but we do see that the content overflowed, and because we have overflow auto set, we have this nice scroll bar here. All right, so let's add this class character image, and we'll set the CSS for that, character img. Alright, and the CSS for that should be relatively simple. We'll probably just want to make the width 60 pixels, for example. So we'll say width 60px. Alright, and then we're also going to have some non-character. They're not images, but they're going to be basically a span that has non-alphabetical characters, right? So they're non-alphabetic. So, for example, like if we had multiple words, here we've got letters, and the name of this is letters as images. So we're going to have 3 words. We need to be able to represent a space. So for that, we'll use a span. Oops. And we'll say class. And the class on this, we'll call it character that is a non-image. Okay. And then inside of that, we're going to add the special HTML entity, ampersand, non-breaking space. Okay, so this is going to add basically white space, and then /span. Okay, so similar to the character image class, we now have this character that's a non-image, right? We might make that img to match this one, right? Character that's a non-image, and we'll need some CSS for that too. So we have a character non-image, right? And we want to add in some CSS there. So the CSS we might want to add, we want to make this similar sized to the character image, so we might make a font size of 60px to match our width there. And we'll kind of see what that looks like. Alright. Expected token. Okay, that all looks good. Reload the page. So the width of the letters has changed, and now we also have a space character here. I can highlight it. Right? So that's nice. Now I can add letters as images, and we'll see the appearance of words. Right, so let's go down here, and we'll just copy one of these, and we'll say S, copied again, and we've got A. Alright, so basically this is what it's going to look like once we type in some text and press the button to translate. We're going to grab this div element, the display stage, and fill it with these images if it's an alphabetical character. If it's not an alphabetical character, like if it's a space, then we're going to have to add this. So there's going to be a few special characters that we're going to have to work with. Alright, so in between each word, whenever we encounter a space, we're going to add a HTML entity that is a non-breaking space. Right? And then this CSS is applied, which makes the space large to match the font size 60px. Right, and we'll copy this, and we'll just say images here. I'm just duplicating the lines. You can copy and paste if you want. Alright, and we might want other characters as well, like an exclamation point. So instead of this non-breaking space, it's still a character that's a non-image. We're going to add an exclamation point. Okay, but we've made this character non-image. This is font size 60, so it should look at least reasonably close to the size of our image. So we refresh the page here. We say letters as images. Okay, so this isn't perfect. It looks like that CSS style didn't take. We can inspect that and see what happened there. Click, and we've got style here. There. Font size did not apply. So that is character non-image. Here we've got character non-image. I misspelled that there. Alright, we'll reload that. There, now our space C got bigger, and also our exclamation point. Now by default things are vertically aligned sort of strangely. The bottom of an image is aligned with the bottom of text. We might want to center these. So we want the center of this exclamation point to align with the center of the image. So that's vertical alignment. So we'll do that with both of these, the character image class and the character non-image class. align middle. There we go. And then vertical align middle for this one. All right, and we see that moved up just a little bit, and it just makes it a little bit nicer there. Okay, so this we'll start our page with this letters as images, and then whenever you type anything up here and click it, all of this will be removed, and whatever you typed in there will be inserted as images. Okay, so that's a nice start. Let's scroll down and start adding some controls here. All right, so we need a label, and the label is going to be for a particular element, and that label is for user text. Okay, so this for element basically tells you what item should take focus when you click on the label. All right, I'll go ahead and add a class for it too. This is class, and this is one of our controls, so it's a control. All right, and it's got for. That for tells you which element you're going to grab focus when you click on the label itself, and I'll show you that here in a second. Then we just say this is text to convert. Slash label, and now we got a text area, and the name here we'll just do, we'll get rid of this stuff. We'll just do a basic text area. We'll have a class on it. Got a typo there. This is going to be a class. This is a control. But it's also a text control. Okay, so this is going to have two CSS classes applied. Anything that's in the .control class, and then also anything that's in the text-control class. So you can do that with HTML elements. They can have many, many different classes, and they will all the CSS in all of those classes will apply to this element. Okay, so this is a text area. We'll add some placeholder text, and we'll set that equal to enter text here. All right, lowercase, I guess. Something like that. So that's a placeholder, and it should be good. Slash text area. Let me go twice. There we go. Slash text area. All right, so reload this page. Text to convert. Now we see. Oops. Let me click off focus, and I click on this, and we see it doesn't grab focus yet. We need to wire that up. We need to hook that up. So this for is it's for something labeled user text. So if I name this, I believe it's the name property user text, like that, this label is now for the control that has the name user text. So I reload this page, and now when I click on this, was it not for? It might be ID. Yeah, it's ID. All right, so the ID user text, okay, this label is for the control that has the ID user text. All right, so when I click on this, the focus goes, and we see that the cursor is now there. So we probably want to do some vertical alignment stuff here. We probably want this to be at the top, and we'll want to do some stuff here to make this a little bit bigger, and we'll probably want the send button or the convert button here to be up at the top as well. So we're going to have three controls. We'll go ahead and add that button now too. Button, and this is type button. You do have to add this type, otherwise by default it's a submit button, which is an older style of JavaScript or HTML and JavaScript. It is used especially with PHP, but we're not using any PHP, so we're just going to use buttons as normal JavaScript buttons. So this is a button type button, and then we're going to add a class to it. This is going to be a control. So it's just one of our controls. And what else do we need on this button? We need placeholder. No, we need the text in there. So this, we'll just say it's 2 image characters, something like that, and then we'll close our button off. All right, so that's going to convert things to image characters. Now at some point we're going to have some on click here. That's going to convert. Now on these these on event attributes, on click for example, what is in here is meant to be JavaScript code that you want to execute when this event occurs. Okay, so you're not just specifying a function name, you're specifying the function name and calling that function. It's very important you do both. You must have the left and right parentheses in there. This, without the left and right parentheses, this is just a variable that holds a function. So you can run this code, and it's like if you had a variable x and it was holding the number 5. You could run that code and it would just be 5, but it doesn't do anything. If you actually want it to do something, you have to call the function. Left and right parentheses. Alright, so those are our controls. Now we need to do a little CSS to, line this all up and make it look nice. Alright, so we have dot controls, or control, and then we have dot text control, or was it, let's see, text control. Alright, so for control, first, basically vertical alignment is what we're most interested in. Let's see, vertical alignment, and this will be top because we want everything to go to the top. Reload this page. Dot control, vertical alignment. Oh, vertical align. There's something going on with my linter. I'm not sure what's up with that. Anyway, reload the page. There we go. Vertically aligned to the top, and then this element, the top is lined up. So it's like there's a line on top of all of these elements, and that line is what's aligned in vertical alignment. If I set vertical align middle to all of these elements, it's like there's a line in the middle of them, and then that line must line up. Okay, so that's kind of how the vertical alignment works. Alright, and then for the text control, we're going to need to give this a particular width. Alright, what we want here is as we expand or shrink, we don't want this to really grow, we don't want this to grow, but if they have more horizontal real estate, we want this text area to grow bigger so that they can see more text. Right, so we kind of want this to be flowy. We're probably going to want to use some sort of percentage width here for this text area. So how can we do that? Well, we use a width property, and we can say there's a special utility you can use in CSS called calc, and it allows you to calculate a width. So we already used up here width 80%. Okay, so that means from here to here is 80% of the screen, right? If you don't include our padding. All right, so 80%. So we're going to calculate 80%. And then we're going to subtract from that the pixel amount of what we would guess the width of this is and the width of this is. Okay, so what we're saying is we want this text area to be 80% of the width. That would take up the entire space here. But then minus, we still want to leave room for this, so the amount of pixels for that, and then minus the amount of pixels for that. Okay, so that's what this calculation is doing. 80% was what we set to this entire width of this controls div, right? And we did box sizing, so that's actually the inside of it. And then 80% minus, and we just kind of guess here. We'll say, 130 px, something like that. Play around with it until you get the number right. And you can reload that, and we see. So that's, I need to probably subtract a little bit more. To image characters, text to convert. All right, so let's subtract 140. Reload, and there we go. That gets us. All right. So it doesn't quite get that though. So maybe subtract a little bit more. So that's not bad. If it gets too small, it'll wrap underneath. That's the text control, right? So that's this class here. So the control class is applying the vertical align top, and then the text control class here on the text area is applying the width here. I'm going to make that just a little bit bigger and see what happens. Okay. So anyway, that's not bad. You can tweak that as much as you want to get that right. Let's see, what else do we need? We need the text control. We need to give it a particular height, right? So maybe 80 pixels because we made the controls 100 pixels, but then we gave it a padding on top and bottom of 10 pixels. So if we did 80, that would mean it would be taking the whole amount of space. So we'll say height 80 px. There we go, and that fills up, and that's nice. All right, so now all we really have to do is add in some JavaScript to make this work. All right, so let's take a look at what we're going to need to do. We have on this button this convert function, which we have not created yet. All right, so we're going to make a function called convert. And just to start out, you always want to console.log and make sure your HTML is wired up with your JavaScript properly. Okay, so this would be convert. All right, and we refresh the page, go over to our trusty dev tools and look at the console and reload the page. We see running application and then image to characters. When we click that, convert clicked. Okay, so that means this is working. So whenever we click the button, this function is going to run. All right, so what are we going to need to do? Well, we're going to need to grab a couple of elements, right? We're going to need to grab the text area. So we can get rid of this console.log. We can say const. We want the text area element. We're going to set that equal to document dot, and we're going to use query selector. Query selector only ever grabs one element. If you want to grab multiple elements, you say query selector all, but we just want one. Query selector document dot query selector, and then inside here, what is the item we want to grab? We're going to grab the item with the class name text control, because that's unique. This is the only item in our HTML that has that class name. Okay, we could also use an ID if we wanted to, but so query selector means we have to use the CSS style syntax, use a dot meaning class name, and get us the HTML element with the class name text control. All right, so we get that element, and we're going to need the display stage as well. Okay, so we can just duplicate this line, and this is going to be the stage element, and the query selector here is again a class, and it's dot display stage. Okay, so these are our two elements, and what you want to do probably just to make sure is log these out. Make sure you have the elements that you think you do before you go too much further. Save the page, reload, press the button, and sure enough we've got two elements. So this is the text area, that's good, and this is the div, that is where we're going to be adding all of our inner HTML. Okay, so that's good. We've got those two items. What else do we need? Well, we need to get the text from the text area. Okay, so const, we have some text, and we say text area element, and since it's a control, you can get the text inside of it with dot value. The dot value only works on controls. Okay, if it was an HTML element instead of a control, you might say inner text. Or to get the inner HTML, you might say inner HTML. But this is a control, and controls are treated specially. Right? So dot value gives us the value of that particular control. Since it's a text control, it's text. All right? So that gives us our text. One thing we might be concerned with is if somebody, the difference in casing. Like all ALL, there's a capital A. We only have one set of letters. We don't have letters that are capital or lowercase, right? So if we look in our list here of letters, right, it's just lowercase. So we want to turn all the letters into lowercase letters, and that's going to help us out. So this by itself would just be the text, and then I'm saying dot to lowercase, and that is going to convert this string to all lowercase characters. Any other characters it'll leave alone. Right? But if it's a caseable character, I can have upper or lower case, it's going to convert the casing to lowercase. All right, so that's the text. And then what do we need to do? We're going to, we'll just log this out real quick and test it. Text. And we can reload the page. I can type some text. Press the button, and we see it is getting that text. So that's good. So always test. You add a little bit of code and then test. Add a little bit of code and then test. All right, what's the next thing we need to do? We're going to have some HTML that we want to add, right? So we'll say let HTML equal the empty string. And what's going to go inside here is a whole bunch of HTML. That's why it's called that as a variable name. What we want to do is go through every single character of this text. And if it's an alphabetical character, then we're going to add one of our image tags. If it's not, we're going to add a span tag with this class and then just put the character inside of that span tag. All right, and there'll be a few other things we want to do in there too. So let's make a for loop for, all right, and then for let I equal 0 while I is less than text dot length. So I is basically going to be an index, the index of this string, and we can access the individual characters of the string text using access by index, right? Left and right square brackets. All right. So that means I is going to go from 0 until I is less than the length of the text, or until it's equal to the length of the text. So as long as this condition is true, the loop continues. Once this condition becomes false, once I is not smaller than the text.length, once it's equal in size, and we know it will be equal in size because we're incrementing it every time with I++. Once it's equal in size, then the loop stops. So that just means I is able to be the index for every single one of the characters in text. Alright, and we can prove that by console.log, and we're going to log out I, and we're going to log out text, and square bracket access characters by index value, right? So this will log out the I value and then the character at that value. We reload, type in some gibberish, and sure enough, that's the I value, and these are the individual characters. So this for loop is working as we would like. So we can remove the console.log. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to need one of these characters. So we can say const chr, and that's going to equal text I. So that's our individual character that we're looking at. And for each one of these, we need to check to see if it's an alphabetical character. So I need some sort of if statement here that says if it's an alphabetical character. How can I do that? Well, there's several ways you can do that. Probably one of the easiest might be to define some function up here, or some string up here, const and have the alphabet in here. And what we can do is search this string to see if our character is in this string, and if it is, it's an alphabetical character. Right? So alphabet, and we can say A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. Alright, so now this variable holds the string of all alphabetical characters, right? And we can say if, now we want to search that string, alphabet, so if alphabet dot index of. So remember, this index of function takes a string and or some object. It works similarly for arrays, but it's searching this object for whatever you pass in here. So in this case, we're searching for the character in question, CHR, and we're trying to see if this character is in alphabet. Now, if it is, index of returns the index of that character, right, in here. So let's say character was the letter D. So alphabet is this string. It's going to look for the index of the letter D. 0, 1, 2, 3. So 3 should get returned for the character D, right? If the character is not in this string, it returns -1. Okay? So basically we're going to say if this search does not equal -1, then we know we have a letter, right? We know we definitely have some letter. So we'll say the HTML then plus equals, and we're going to add to it. The reason we have to do plus equals is because we're going through a loop and we're adding things one at a time to this HTML variable. Okay, so we started it out empty, and then we're adding one thing after another. Okay, we're going to use the template syntax for the strings. This is the newer syntax for strings in JavaScript. It's 2 backticks, but it allows us to insert variable data into the string easily. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to have an image tag, img, and we're going to have a class on that. And that class we're going to say is chr_img. All right, and then we're going to have the image source, the source attribute, src, and 2 quotes around that. And then the source on this is going to be letters. That's the name of our directory holding all of our images. Letters. And then slash, and then whatever character we have. So this character, we're only in this if clause when we actually do have an alphabetical character. So we know for sure we should have an alphabetical character in here, so we can just use that character, CHR, in here. And then use $, left and right curly brackets, and put in CHR, and this whole thing is replaced with whatever value is stored in that variable. Okay, so if this was D, like we mentioned, this might be the letter D, then this whole thing would be swapped in with D, and then you say .png afterwards. And if we look in here, d.png is one of these images. Okay, so we're dynamically constructing this image tag. All right, so that's all of the attributes in the image tag, so we need to close it. It does not have any children, so it's self-closing. Call that a void element. And what else? Well, we're actually adding HTML to inside of another HTML element. And if we wanted to make it look nice, if we were inspecting the element, we can just kind of add a new line character. That's not at all necessary. You don't really have to, but it kind of makes it a little bit nicer when you inspect the elements to see what's happening. So after that, we've got this HTML. This should be a big list of a bunch of image tags, right? And then we're going to want to use the stage element and basically do inner HTML and set the inner HTML of our stage element. Now remember, inner HTML is a source of major confusion because the H, the T, the M, and the L are all capitalized, despite other things like document.get element by ID. The ID is not all capitalized. It's a capital I and a lowercase d. So this gets students a lot of the time, so be careful with that. This is built into JavaScript and you can't change it. Variable names that you make, I could have changed this variable name to be all capitalized or whatever, but So you will see sometimes HTML like this, or with capital H and lowercase TML, but this is part of the JavaScript API, and we can't change that. Right? So remember, inner.html is always capitalized. So stage.innerHTML, we're now going to set that equal to the HTML variable we just created. All right, and all we've done is we're just, for every character they type that is alphabetical, we're adding an image character to it, or an image tag. So this will ignore all the other characters. So if we have spaces, it's going to ignore the spaces. If we have periods or exclamation points, it's going to ignore all of that, commas, and it's only going to print out the letters. So image to characters, you click it out, click it, and let's see. Did I save it? Where's our console.log? No, I gotta refresh. Okay, on click. Uncaught reference error. Stage is not defined. Stage dot, oh, it's stage element. Okay, this is really important. When you have an error, a lot of times you can just see this is clickable. This is a link. It tells you the line number that the error is on, and you can just click on that. And then it will show up here in your developer tools. So look, it's highlighted the part of the code that's wrong, right? If I reload this and I do it again, click, we get the error. I can click on this error and it highlights it up here, or I can look at the numbers and go to my code and look at line number 112, right? And the problem here is instead of, it's not stage, it's stage element. Okay, so I do that. Reload. Add a comma or something. Oops. Run it. Hey, how are you? Right? No spaces and no exclamation point. So this is kind of working, but we have more to do. Okay, so what else do we want to do? If it's an alphabetical character, we've handled it. What if it's a space? Else if we have a space. Well, if it's, we have spaces we need to be concerned with. We have ampersands, less than symbols. There's a few things. So let's just start with the space. If character triple equals, always use triple equals comparisons in JavaScript. If the character equals a single white space, what we're going to do is we're going to say HTML plus equals, and we're going to add our string template again. I forgot my semicolon over here. And the template is, instead of an image tag, we're going to add a span. And the span is going to have our class character, CHR, NonImage, IMG, and let's see what else. That's it, I think. And we're going to close that span. But what are we going to put in here? We're going to put in an ampersand non-breaking space. Okay, so that's going to give us a space. Alright, so we can keep this, copy it, refresh the page, paste it, click, and NPSP, non-breaking space. There we go. Alright, let's try that again. Select all, copy, refresh, paste, click, and now we see we have space. So that's nice. Now we need the comma and the quotation, or the question mark. So some other things that we might also need is an ampersand, for example, because in HTML, if you type just an ampersand, it's going to think it's part of an HTML entity. These are HTML entities, basically escape sequences that allow you to specify characters that might otherwise be used in the HTML syntax, right? So we could just copy and paste this. Else if character equals, we'll do ampersand, right? And then the HTML entity for that is ampersand AMP semicolon. Then we can also do the less than symbol. We need to do that one because in HTML thinks the less than symbol is the beginning of a tag, so we have to do some work here and say this is the HTML entity less than. What else do we need? We need new line characters. So if we wanted to make a bunch of new lines in here, we need to print out new lines here as well. So that's in HTML, that's the BR tag. So anytime the character is a new line character, so \n, what we're going to want to do is add a whole bunch of BR tags. We're going to add, I don't know, 3 of them, a new line character afterwards. And after each one of these, we should probably add a new line character. Again, that's not required. It's just going to make it look a little bit nicer if you go to inspect the elements in the inner HTML. So this is only for human consumption while we're doing this \n. You don't need it at all. The program would work fine without it. But if you want to look at the code and see what's happening, it's going to look better with the new line characters in it. All right, reload the page. Nope. Let's see, you and me is, and then Shift Enter, 5 is less than 11. And let's add There we go. Okay, so this will test our ampersand, this will test our less than symbol, it'll test the new line characters, and this as well, and it shouldn't show up because we haven't taken care of this extra case yet. Alright, there we go. Reload the page. Did not mean to do that. Copy and paste that image. So you, we see the ampersand works, and me, we see that the new line works, right? And we see we tried 2 new lines here in a row. 5 is less than 11 did not show up because the numeric keys have not been taken into account yet. Okay, so 11 is other keys, or other characters, just like the exclamation mark is other characters. So we haven't taken those into account yet. So the very last thing we need to do here, else, is basically, if it's anything else, then we just make one of these span tags and just put that character in there. So we have a span with the class. It's a non-image class, right? And instead of an HTML entity, we're just going to put in that character, CHR, whatever it is, right? We translated all the ones that we would need to translate, and if we don't need to translate it, then we just print it in as a regular character. Right, so let me copy and paste this. Refresh, paste. You and me, 5 is greater than 11, or less than 11, okay, and we got our exclamation points. Okay, so this all appears to be working pretty well. And then one of the last things we might want to add is the ability to press enter to do this instead of having to click this. Right, so I might want to shrink this down a little bit. Add a function down here. And that function will be called DetectKey, and I want to detect what key is being pressed. Every time the text area has focus, I want to check what key is being pressed, and if it's the enter key by itself, then I'm going to convert the text from the text area into images. Alright, so const ev equals window.event. There we go, if. So basically, if the event key code, so that's the key that was pressed, ev.keycode equals equals 13, okay, then we know that is the enter key. We know that because we looked that up in past sessions. The 13 is the key code for the enter key, right? So if we have the enter key, but also the shift key is not being pressed, so not event.shiftKey. Okay, sorry, that's not event. There we go. All right. The key code is enter and the shift key is not being pressed. Then we want to prevent the default behavior, which would be add a new line to the text area. So ev.prevent default. And then we have, we're just going to call convert, which would be the same as pressing the convert button, right? Convert. All right, DetectKey, event, window.event. All right, so this function we want to run every single time somebody types a character here. All right, so DetectKey is the JavaScript that we want to run on the event. We're going to add an on event attribute, so on key press. And then what JavaScript do we want to run when a key is pressed? Oops, we want the DetectKey to execute. And if the key is just an enter key by itself, it's going to be the same as clicking this button. All right, so we refresh, paste, and I press enter, and sure enough, that works. Now this should still allow me to press shift enter, and it does. And I can adjust this, I can add some new line characters here, press enter. There we go. Okay. So that is basically replacing letters as images. So I'll scroll down through the code and you can take a look at it. My linter's acting up a little bit here, so ignore the red and the yellow. And this is basically the CSS we started with. This is the CSS we added. Controls, display stage, character image, character non-image, control, and then text control. And then that's the end of the style tag, the head tag, and here's our HTML, right? So this can be whatever you want starting out. This is just what we want the person to see when they first start, and it's just the title of it, letters as images, right? That needs to be an S, letters as images, letters as images, there we go. And then whenever they type something, you have the label. When I click on the label, I get focus, that's good. Text area, and then the button. So this is the HTML. This is the important part, right? The controls and the display stage. This can be whatever you want inside. And then the HR tags, of course. And then the JavaScript. So here we go. We've got running application. This we need to search to see what character we have. We see if it's an alphabetical character. The convert function, we grab the text area element and then the stage element, and then we get the text from the text area element. Create a variable that's an empty string called HTML, and then we iterate over each one of the characters in the variable text. Okay, so character is the character we're currently iterating. If the character is in the alphabet string, then we add the image, and the path to that image is the name of the folder, which up here we saw on the desktop was letters, slash, and then the character name, and then .png. Alright. Otherwise, if it's an empty space, we want to add a non-breaking space HTML entity inside of a span. Same for an ampersand. We'll add the ampersand HTML entity. Less than, we'll add the less than. And new line character, we'll add a bunch of BR tags. Alright, and then the last one, if it's anything else, we'll just go ahead and put that character in, and we should be good. Alright, and what we do is take stage element and say enter HTML equals this new string of HTML that we created. And the last thing we did was detect key. That allows us to press enter and then just call that convert function. Okay, so this has been a demonstration that shows you a little bit, it's sort of how fonts work, but we're using HTML to kind of understand the concept. Every character is actually stored in the computer as a binary number, and then depending on what application you're using, it looks at that binary number and sees what font you're supposed to be using, and it puts a tiny glyph or a picture of what that visual representation of that binary number should be. Right? So it's kind of similar to that. So you can use this for a lot of things in HTML. It's kind of a common thing to do. All right. So that should be enough for letters as images.